Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kara Tibby. I'm the practice manager for the lifestyle medicine practice, and I'm delighted to introduce our speaker today, who I've known and worked with for several years. Our webinar today is The Science Behind Gut Health, and it is delivered by our very own gut health expert, Krista Gast. Krista is a registered dietitian and national board certified health and wellness coach for the Corewell Health Lifestyle Medicine team. Krista has over 20 years of experience supporting and empowering our patients and the community to take charge of their own health and realize their own unique vision of wellness. With expertise in both clinical and culinary nutrition, Krista aims to take the guesswork out of healthy eating by inspiring people to get into their kitchens and cook delicious food that also happens to support their health. Since Krista has had her own personal journey with inflammatory bowel disease and has learned firsthand the power food and lifestyle choices have on gut health and how we can use that to improve our total health, it is her passion to help people improve their gut health through food and lifestyle behaviors to feel better and to live a healthier life long term. So if you are here with us watching live, just know to enter any questions that you have during the session in the chat. And at the end of the presentation, we'll give about 5 to 10 minutes to go through those questions and ask Krista some of those. I'll be reading those out at the end. So without further ado, we're so excited to hear from you, Krista. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Kira. So excited to be here. So grateful for you guys having me. This is, as Kira mentioned, one of my specialties, but also definitely my passion, both personally and professionally. So I always feel lucky when I get to bring this information to more and more people. So thanks for everybody for joining live and hanging in there with me today. And for those of you that are going to watch it recorded, hope you enjoy this. Hope this gives you some enlightenment that you can apply to your daily lives. So we'll go ahead and get going. So today we're going to learn more about what the microbiome is, right? We're all hearing about this term, the microbiome. What does that really even mean? So we're going to dig a little bit into that first off. Then we're going to explore how the gut impacts the entire body. It's really kind of the epicenter of our total body health. And then we're going to learn how can we actually create a healthy gut through the food and the lifestyle habits that we employ in our day-to-day lives. I have no financial conflicts to disclose as part of this presentation. And here we go. Let's learn a little bit about the microbiome. So our microbiome, definitely a buzzword right now and being used in lots of ways to sell lots of products, right? But what does that actually even mean and why should you care about that? So we have a very large, diverse community of microbes that are living in our gut, approximately 38 trillion. So that's a lot of microbes that are living right inside of our gut. So actually, when you think about it, we are over 100 times more microbes than we are human cells. For some people, they get like a little shiver, creepy feeling, right? When you hear that. But trust me, we want these microbes. These microbes are exactly what we need for our whole body health. So it's a good thing that we're more microbes than human cells. And one of the things that makes the microbiome really interesting, I think, is that each of us, our gut microbiome is as unique as your fingerprint is. So that means there's not another person on this planet that has a microbiome that's identical to yours. So that explains a lot of why what works for one person may not work for another person because we are all so unique. So our microbiome has some kind of far-reaching impacts. We have impacts on immunity, metabolism, gene expression, and also our cognition, our mood, our brain health, which I think we often think of as separate sometimes from the rest of our body. But it's really important that we actually look at how the gut can impact that positively and sometimes negatively for us throughout the years, and things that we can do to actually change some of the outcomes of this. So this is one of my favorite quotes is all disease begins in the gut. So wise Hippocrates knew it long before we did. We're finally just scratching the surface really of gut health and the gut microbiome. And it really truly does things like chronic disease, as we'll see as we go through this presentation today, how the gut really sets the stage for that. So this is a look at what a healthy gut looks like, which is where you see on the side of gut homeostasis there. It's a nice, healthy, happy gut. And then on the other side of our slide, we see dysbiosis. So dysbiosis is really a term that we clinically use for a gut that's very out of balance. So as you can see on our dysbiosis side of the slide, it doesn't look so friendly, does it? It looks kind of angry. Big differences here where we see this barrier. That barrier we see, functional barrier, that is your gut wall. So normally in a nice healthy gut, as we see here on this slide, it's nice and tight, right? We don't have gaps in that gut wall. We don't have openings in that gut wall. It's really supposed to protect us. So think of your colon as that outside world, and it's that gut wall protecting the outside world from the rest of your body. So it's an important barrier that we need to maintain to have a nice balanced gut. So, as we can see under dysbiosis, now we have gaps. Now we see some things getting through into the bloodstream that otherwise shouldn't be able to. This is how we start to get inflammation that can spread throughout the body and just cause lots of other issues. So, what happens is we get this loss of diversity. So, we're going to get to this a little bit more as we go on. But loss of diversity, when I say that, I mean a loss of diversity of the microbial strains that are living in our gut. So I bet most of you have heard of the term probiotic. So probiotic, that's the healthy microbes that I'm referring to that are living in the gut. We want diverse strains. We want a very diverse gut microbiome community because they can go to work for us. They can also help us digest foods better. So when we get dysbiosis along the way, as a result of diet, maybe stress in there, traumatic incidences, viruses, infections, all kinds of things that can come and happen to us, leads to this loss of diversity in the gut. So a loss of diversity of probiotics. And then we get these endotoxins and inflammatory compounds that the bad bacteria are producing. That's what we see here on dysbiosis. That's all the nasty little things getting through the gut wall. They're kind of breaking that down and running loose, right? So we can get this overreacting immune system that sometimes can lead to autoimmune conditions even. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a bit here. So in knowing what we just learned, right, on that slide, is dysbiosis the root cause of chronic disease for us? I will say yes. So, what are we eating? How are we making this happen? So, definitely a big one that's changed over the last few decades is us eating more processed foods. These processed foods definitely have an impact on the gut microbiome. So, that results in some loss of that diversity. So, how does that happen? So, over the last 50 years, we've had a lot of advancements in technology, and this has resulted in these cheaper, very easy to eat processed foods. So, interestingly, there's over 300,000 edible plant foods that are actually available to us to eat, but over only half of our bodies, or yet more than half of our bodies' needs are met by mainly four of these: rice, potatoes, wheat, and corn. And most of those are eaten by us in a highly processed form. So, in order to prevent, manage, or reverse chronic disease, we must eat plants in our diet and we must have a diverse selection of those plants in our diet. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that is here in a little bit. There was an interesting couple of studies done in France that looked at the ultra processed foods that the participants in the study were eating. And they found that the higher their consumption of the processed foods, the higher the risk of developing GI diseases, digestive diseases like irritable bowel syndrome, for one. So we see a bigger increase, and we're seeing that now here in the United States, where we have a much bigger increase in these different chronic issues as a result of that gut dysbiosis that's happening. A little bit about these chronic diseases, right? What are these actually, and why should we be worried about these? So, as you see here on the slide, 6 in 10 of us here in the United States actually have one of these chronic diseases that are listed. 4 in 10 of us have two or more, or we probably know people in our own family that are struggling with some of these chronic diseases. Why is that important? Right? Because yes, we've made medical advancements, but that has an impact on how we live our life. So, a little bit about health span versus lifespan. So, what's the difference? So, really, here in the United States, we're living longer, but there's a question of are we actually living better with that longer lifespan? So, that lifespan is the amount of years that we're alive here. And the health span is how many of those years are we able to spend free of chronic disease, where we can live our life to the fullest the way we want to, doing the things that we want to do. It's important, right? Um, and in 2020, the American Heart Association actually released a report on life expectancy in the United States and took a look at health span versus lifespan. So, what they found was that the average life expectancy here in the United States was about 78.7 years of age. But the health span, and here's the key here, the health span in the United States is at 66 years of age. So there's about a 13.8 year gap between living and actually living well, right? That's that quality. Health span is that quality of life where we're not burdened by chronic disease. Certainly, we can stay alive longer. We have medications and different medical procedures and advancements. But what's your life going to be like, right? I'm certain every single one of you on here would say, I want to live better. I want to live good. I want to feel good. And there's nobody that puts this more beautifully than Dr. David Katz. He is a very well-known lifestyle medicine physician. And he says that health span and lifespan is adding years to life and life to those years. And that's exactly, I think, what every single one of us wants. And that's probably why you're here participating in the Plant Power Challenge this month, because that's important to you. So let's talk a little bit, dig a little bit more into some of these effects that the gut microbiome has on the rest of our health. So we know that about 70% of our immune system is located in your gut. So the gut has a very primary role in regulation of the immune system. So it's another reason that we really want to be thinking about how are we treating our gut? How are we feeding our gut? So, like I said on the earlier slide, the gut is exposed to that outside world, right? So everything we eat, we drink, we breathe, that's all coming in and through and then down into the gut is where it ends up. So we want to keep that nice gut wall really tight. Like we want to stay in that gut homeostasis that we saw in the earlier slide. So gut health, being that the immune system is in close proximity to the gut, gut health and immune health are completely intertwined. So on one side of the gut wall are our 38 trillion microbes, and on the other side is that 70% of our immune system. So, from an early age, our gut microbes are playing a very critical role in training that immune system. So, with immunity, we can get overreactions and we can get underreactions. So, when we get overreactions, then we see more of a response that's an allergic response or an autoimmune response. If we have an underreaction, we can see more susceptibility to infections, viruses, and also certain types of cancer. So, the role that the gut plays in connecting and communicating with the immune system is vital. We also see risks. So, speaking of when we're starting from an early age, we do see some risks now with birth by C-section, being bottle fed instead of breastfed, or receiving antibiotics very early in life, have all been associated with an increased risk of allergic and autoimmune diseases like asthma, seasonal allergies, type 1 diabetes, celiac disease, just to name a few. So, right, we need to be thinking about how are we cultivating this gut microbiome. So, kind of think of it. I like to garden, so I always kind of think of it like that, right? We want to tend to our soil. Any of you that are gardeners know that, right? The healthier your soil, the better luck you're going to have with producing beautiful produce as a result. So we want to cultivate that. And it's the same thing in our gut. We really want to cultivate that soil in our gut, and that soil is really our probiotics. So when we damage those probiotics, you're also going to be having an effect on the immune system, which is why diet plays such a vital role in not only managing how we feel with our gut, but also other conditions that might have arisen as a result. So, as I just mentioned a few of these on the last slide, so we can see when we have this dysbiosis in the gut, we can see increased risk for development of things like asthma, food allergies, and I'll also put there food intolerances. Food intolerances I see as a symptom of gut dysbiosis, not necessarily the cause. So we start to see often when we start having problems with our gut over a period of time of not having a very good nutrient rich diet, we can start to see these food intolerances pop up as a result of that. Um, and so we want to fix gut health underneath it. That's at the core. And then we often see these food intolerances improve significantly as a result. We also see increased risks for inflammatory bowel disease to develop, rheumatoid arthritis. Once again, thinking about that inflammation, right, that I mentioned earlier, how some of those nasty compounds can cross through that more open gut wall and cause inflammatory reactions in the body, including autoimmune. So, skin conditions as well as psoriasis and eczema, and then even seasonal allergies can be impacted by our gut health as well. So, a little bit about metabolism. Metabolism and gut health go hand in hand. And so if you're someone who, is noticing weight's increasing and you're having really big challenge of how come I can't lose this now at this point in my life? You want to think about your gut. And that's not usually something that we think about, right? When it comes to losing weight, but it's something we must be thinking about. So we know it's not all about calories in, calories out. Evidence suggests our microbes have a very big influence on our appetite hormones. There's two of those called ghrelin and leptin, and as well as those that are involved in insulin sensitivity, which play a big role in our metabolism. So gut health is important when we're talking about obesity. Also hyperlipidemia, when we have high LDL, high overall cholesterol. This is something we can think about when we're looking at the gut and how can we improve that. We have a much better chance at lowering our LDL and our total cholesterol when we start to get gut health in line. We also see increased risk for chronic kidney disease, type 2 diabetes. Once again, that goes back to how the gut's involved in insulin sensitivity, heart disease. And then a big one that is on the rise now is our non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NASH. That is one that we also can work on the gut to help improve management of that condition as well. So I like this one. This one is something I keep in every gut health presentation I do, because when I saw it for the first time at a conference, I was kind of blown away by it. So what you're looking at here is a microbiota transplantation that can cause weight gain. So this is where they took obese microbiota. So when I say that, I mean the microbiome of a mouse that was having trouble with weight, right? Having trouble controlling weight. They took that and they transplanted that microbiome into a sterile microbiome of a mouse. And other sterile mice were transplanted with underweight microbiota, and then also normal microbiota. They were all fed the same amount of calories and food. Those transplanted with the obese microbiota became obese. Those fed the underweight microbiota were underweight, right? And so on. So it tells us a lot, and we learned even more since this study, but it tells us a lot about how the microbiome plays a significant role in our weight. And we don't even know anywhere near what I'm sure we will in the years to come, but about certain strains, different strains that do different things, right? So once again, back to microbial diversity. We want to build up this nice, diverse community of healthy microbes so that they can actually work in our favor and we're not battling against that. There's a lot we can do to shift that balance in our gut of what kinds of bacteria are there. So a little bit on gene expression. This was in our list of what can be affected by the gut. So gene expression, this is another fascinating one, because we often feel like, okay, I see these diseases running through my family. Maybe somebody has type 2 diabetes in their family, heart disease, right? Some of these chronic diseases, we feel like we're destined for that, and that it's really out of my power. It's going to happen to me eventually because everybody in my family has it. But in reality, only accounts for about 25% of the risk of you developing those. And the rest of that is all lifestyle habits. So I hope that that makes you feel good, that that makes you feel empowered, because you really do have a lot of control over some of these chronic diseases that are of lifestyle. So your genes are kind of like a light switch, and it's your lifestyle, including diet, that turns them on or off. So that's where we can have some of that control. We change our diet, we change how we feed the gut. We can also change how our genes express or don't express. So if we know we have some of these family histories of these chronic diseases, this is important for you to think about, because you actually making some changes, probably a lot of these changes that you've already made during the Plant Power Challenge are key in this. If you've already developed even chronic diseases, there's a heck of a lot you can do to change that. So hopefully that makes you feel empowered, that you can actually choose what genes get expressed in many ways. So a little bit on brain health. Mood and cognition, and how does the gut play a role in that? So your gut is actually a nervous system hub. It's kind of like a little epicenter, and it contains 500 million nerves. So that's pretty significant. Hormones that influence our brain. So one I'm sure, well, actually both, probably a lot of you are familiar with, serotonin, a lot of times called the feel-good hormone. 90% of that is actually made by the gut. 50% of the dopamine is actually made in the gut. These are the feel goods, right? Often we get dopamine hits from sugar, right? Sugar, sweet beverages, added sugar to foods, right? You probably can feel that when you have it. Oh, yeah, feel better, but it's short-lived, isn't it? It's not permanent, right? It doesn't leave us in this really great state of euphoria after we have that, only for a short period of time. So we could do better. Instead of going for these short-term fixes, let's actually get to the root of this and make this a longer lasting thing that we can manage with our diet and our gut. So many of the neurotransmitters, actually, the gut plays a big role in providing the building blocks for those, and also hormones like estrogen and testosterone. We can see a big difference in balance with hormones too when we start feeding our gut properly. So let's look at some of the impacts that dysbiosis can have on our brain. We can see greater incidences of anxiety and depression. There's actually a really fantastic study. I don't have it linked on here, but it's called the SMILES trial. If you want to look at that a little bit more, that's kind of a landmark study that was done on specifically on depression. Patients that were moderate to severe depression and already on medications for management, and they had them add more fruit and vegetable servings to their diet. And they found the more that they were adding, the better the management of the depression became. So, what that tells us is if we start early, we might be able to prevent or lessen how severe that is with anxiety and depression by adding more servings of just fruits and vegetables to the diet, right? It doesn't take an overhaul to see benefits. And that's what I hope you take away today is, these little steps of improving the diet quality can make a really big difference over time. So those of you that struggle with that, adding more of these foods into the diet and start generating your own serotonin, your own dopamine hits, and manage that longer term. We also see increase in risk for Alzheimer's disease and general cognitive decline that is often as a result of aging. Doesn't have to be as a result of aging. There's some things we can do to help slow that decline down. Also, Parkinson's disease, ADHD, and then brain fog that is particularly associated with those that have inflammatory bowel disease, right? So we have connections here with the brain. We have a physical connection, which is our vagus nerve. A lot of you may have heard that. If you're online looking at nutrition stuff or gut health, you've probably seen vagus nerve stuff. And I kind of picture it like broadband cable between the brain and the gut. And it's like high speed. So we get trillions of signals happening all the time between the gut and the brain. So they are physically connected. It's not in your imagination that your gut is connected to your brain, especially those of you, if you're like me, that phrase, I have a gut feeling, It's real, right? You feel it, in your gut immediately often. So we have that. And then the lesser direct connection, other than the vagus nerve physical connection, would be our neurotransmitters that I just spoke about on the previous slide. So our serotonin, dopamine, and other neurotransmitters. That's our less direct connection between brain and gut. That's another way they communicate. So if we're hitting improving gut health, feeding the gut better, we're going to improve those communications, those signaling that happens between the two. And hopefully, then we can start to see some improvement with brain fog. We can start to see improvement even with focus. And then, of course, we talked about anxiety and depression. We can even see where, with the gut producing some really fantastic anti-inflammatory compounds that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, we actually can see that those compounds make it across the blood-brain barrier and are actually seen on MRI in the brain when they're looking in these Alzheimer's studies. So a lot more to learn there about how can we really harness more of that power. But really exciting, I think, to see that, our gut and the way we feed it really, really matters. So there was a fantastic project done called the American Gut Project. Dr. Rob Knight is the co-founder of that. And one of the key findings that came out of that was the single greatest predictor of a very healthy, optimal gut microbiome is the diversity of the plants we're bringing into the diet. So an interesting thought is that here in the United States, we eat very calorie rich foods that are not necessarily nutrient rich. And by that, I mean fiber deficient on our standard American diet. So, in essence, here in the United States, we're in this pickle of that we are overfed, but we're undernourished. So, think about that, right? How could we be overfed but undernourished? It just seems crazy, right? But it's true because we are undernourished with these nutrients we need. Fiber being number one for the gut, but also antioxidants found in plant foods that we eat actually make it down to the gut and feed our lovely microbes like fiber does. And lots of other nutrients that we get in those foods to really optimize our gut so we can optimize our health. So that finding of the diversity of plants in the diet out of this project was that eating 30 different plant foods within the course of a week was the greatest predictor of the microbial diversity that we want, right? We learned already right when we started today, we want diversity of microbes. So when we change up the different plants, that means we're bringing in different kinds of fiber. And that means different kinds of food for those microbes. And that's what's great because then we keep building up all those different microbial strains. So, since there are millions of types of fiber in nature, only place we get it is plant foods. So that's why if we're not putting plant foods in our diet, we are mortgaging our health in the long term because we're missing out on the fiber and all of those great disease fighters that we find in our plant foods. So diversity of plants equals diversity of fiber equals diversity of microbes, which equals a healthy gut. So since all these different types of fiber have their own properties, these microbes are kind of picky eaters, right? Like we may even have a strain that likes black beans and we only feed in black beans maybe a few times a year. So we're not really nourishing that type of probiotic. And you might be the person that says, well, yeah, every time I eat them, I don't feel good, right? Well, that's because you're not eating them very consistently. Maybe you're only eating them a few times a year. And that's problematic because that microbe likes it, but then you take it away and it starts to kind of die back. And when the microbes start to die back because we're not feeding them, that means if you think about that gut wall I showed on one of those first slides, that means those probiotics, maybe you're putting them in through a supplement or whatever ones exist there, aren't getting fed. They start to die back, but they're still hungry. So they're looking for food. Where do they look? Your gut wall. There's a beautiful protective mucus lining on there that helps keep things tight like we want, right? We saw that nice gut with the tight wall. That's what we want. We want to keep it like that. But if the microbes are starting to digest that mucus lining, that's where you might probably have heard of the term leaky gut. And that is really what's happening there. We're starting to get now some leakiness. We've got those gaps. Now things can get through that should not, and we start to get the effects of that like we talked about, right? So variety is very important. So often I think we hear about you should eat more fiber. And then sometimes we're told just have a fiber supplement and you're good to go. Yes, a fiber supplement is helpful in many cases. However, we have to work on bringing the foods in because of what all comes with that together and is tied up with that fiber. So it's not great to just eat broccoli all the time or kale all the time and think we're doing good. We want to broaden that lens out, right? We kind of have that feeling here in the United States of, well, if it's good for me, then probably should eat a lot of this. It's really good for me, right? More is better. Not always. We want to try to switch it up. We want week to week, switch up the vegetables you had from last week, bring some other ones in so that we're really continuing to nourish those probiotics that are living in the gut and bringing in phytonutrients and antioxidants and vitamins and minerals. So this is what we need, right? So this is what I'm alluding to here. So now we're going to dig into what actually happens when we do this. So prebiotics, that's our umbrella term for things like fiber, those antioxidants, the phytonutrients. Those are our prebiotics food for our probiotics. So we feed our probiotics. They digest that for you. We can't digest fiber on our own. So that is why we need our probiotics. And often we struggle. If we haven't been getting fiber in, we might struggle a little bit. And that's okay. That's your gut kind of being exercised, right? It's got to build up. So take it low and slow and bring that fiber in. You will be well rewarded with what we call postbiotics. The postbiotics, that's where the magic happens. That is short chain fatty acids. That's why we call them postbiotics, a lot easier to say, but they're very anti-inflammatory. So postbiotics, they do amazing work inside your gut. So a few of the things they do, suppress the more inflammatory strains that exist there so they don't get to be too much and shift that balance into dysbiosis. Prevent growth of inflammatory bacteria, so prevent them from becoming higher numbers, and then reverse dysbiosis. Yes, you can reverse dysbiosis and strengthen that intestinal barrier again. So that's the ticket. We want these postbiotics being generated on a daily basis. They have major healing effects throughout our body. So going back to what the gut's involved in, body wide, the gut uses postbiotics to do that communication with the immune system we spoke about earlier. They can inhibit that unnecessary inflammation. We also can see that they are involved in cancer prevention by helping with repair, DNA damage repair, type 2 diabetes, getting you more insulin sensitive, heart disease. One of the ways with cholesterol, especially, is fiber acts kind of like a magnet with LDL cholesterol and getting it out through the gut. So fiber's your friend. If you're having trouble getting that LDL down, start getting that diversity of plant foods in now. Weight management, which we talked about with metabolism before, it's these postbiotics that are used by the gut to do this communication and regulation of these processes. And then, of course, brain health, like I mentioned, these are the compounds I was referring to that can cross that blood-brain barrier and have nice action in the brain. So a lot of things, these postbiotics are like kind of like the VIP in our body. So that's what we want our gut to be able to produce more of them. So what to feed our gut, right? How do we actually go about putting this into action? So we talked about our standard American diet and where have we gone wrong here? So as you see here on the picture here, this little pie chart, we see that the majority of our calories, and actually, I've got to update this because actually, I believe processed foods, it's now 69%. So it just keeps going up. So processed foods are contributing the majority of our calories. No nutrient density, really probably hardly any fiber. Then we have animal products, and a lot of those are processed animal products. Not great for our gut at all. And then a measly little 7% of our plant foods, right? We really need to shift this and kind of flip this in the opposite direction. So a couple of other things to think about would be additives that are in those processed foods. That's one of the ways that those are not good for our gut. They've crept into our food system, and there's more and more and more of them every year. The problem is they added a lot of these to keep food from spoiling originally, so they kill bacteria on the food. But imagine what that does to those precious little microbes living in your gut, right? Wiping them out. Also farming practices. Things have changed over the last several decades, and plants actually have their own microbiome. This benefits your microbiome when you eat them. So we want that. We want those plants to be able to develop. The problem is the major increase in the use of pesticides and herbicides over the last several decades. It just doesn't allow that microbiome to survive on the plant. And then we don't get that advantage when we eat it. We also see the overuse of antibiotics in animal farming, and that's actually where the majority of antibiotics are used, are in animal farming. So something to think about when you are buying those animal products, how they were raised. It's important. We should know where our food is coming from, and we've kind of lost touch with that. It's time to get back in touch with that. And then exercise. So a lot of us are living a sedentary lifestyle. Exercise can change your gut microbiome and increase the probiotics to produce more of the postbiotics. That's a good win, right? So not only fiber, but also movement. And in these studies, walking was the exercise that was used. We see a 40% increase in healthy microbes producing more postbiotics with walking. Bonus points if you can get outside and do that. I know a lot of you are probably joining from all over the place. I'm in Michigan, and it is a deep freeze here, so it's not great to walk right now. But when you can get outside and do that, bonus points for that, that'll actually help you get more postbiotics, which is great. And then, of course, we're not getting enough fiber. So a little bit of how unhealthy microbiome can work against us. So we choose whether we feed into the good bugs or the bad bugs. If we're feeding into the bad bugs, big problem there. So you see this TMAO on the slide. This is a very, very inflammatory compound that was discovered at Cleveland Clinic. So you can actually look more into this if you go online and look at TMAO and Cleveland Clinic if you want to read into some of the studies. But TMAO we know now is not a good compound we want produced. It's very inflammatory. It's directly tied to increased risk for heart attack and stroke and chronic kidney disease. And now we're finding out even more with colon cancer and type 2 diabetes as well, and fatty liver disease. So something we don't want. How can we stop that? By feeding into the good bacteria. If we have a diet that's heavy in red meat, dairy fat, and eggs, we are providing the building blocks for the bad bacteria to finish producing that TMAO. So your bad bacteria are capable of producing it. We provided the building blocks through the foods that we eat. So to cut down on that, especially if you have a family history of heart disease, this is something you want to be thinking about. So what we actually see is when we remove or limit some of those things in the diet, the gut actually loses the capability to produce that nasty chemical. Huge win, right? So that's very easily actually controlled by us. We're the ones that can cause that to happen. And then of course, bacterial endotoxin we saw in one of our previous slides. That's one of those inflammatory things that can get through that leaky wall and cause issues with inflammation body-wide. And then when we feed the good bugs, what do we get? Short chain fatty acids, postbiotics. That's what we want. So we get to choose with every choice we take to put food or drink in our mouth. We choose which way that gut's going to go for us. That is all in our power. So a little bit on fiber here, couple different types, soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber, that's the golden stuff. That's the prebiotic food for the microbes. It dissolves in water. We find it in things like oats, beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, berries, most of our plant foods. We're going to find this in. Insoluble fiber is going to be the roughage, is what we often call that. Doesn't dissolve in water, passes through relatively undigested, contributes that stool, that bulk in our stool. We find this a lot in our whole grains, some of our vegetables as well. Diversity is key here. So we get both in plant foods, and we want both. As we can see, right? It has different impacts on our stool and our gut. So we want to bring a little bit of both into the mix. The healthy bacteria, remember, they cannot survive without fiber. So we know we need it, but how much do we need? Number one, steady, consistent supply. Very, very key. At least 30 grams of fiber per day. We want to try to get in. The more you start getting these foods in, the easier it's going to be to get to those numbers. I see people that are doing this and it's 40 grams and beyond, and it's not even hard, right? So it's just add. Think about adding. What can I add to my plate that contains fiber today? What can I add to my dinner tonight? Maybe that I already have planned. Add a little salad with it. Add an extra serving of vegetables to it. Every serving matters. The more diverse the microbiome, the lower the risk of chronic disease. As you see, the Hadza people of Tanzania, 100 grams of fiber per day. And that's because it's a predominantly plant based diet on a daily basis. And they actually have the lowest rates of chronic disease, virtually none of the diseases we deal with in Western side of the world. So we can see this in action happening. All right, so a little bit of beyond fiber. There are other parts or other foods that also feed our gut in addition to fiber. So I said umbrella of prebiotics. These are foods that would fall under that umbrella that aren't necessarily fiber foods, but they contain a class of plant nutrients that we call polyphenols. So you can see here, cocoa, that would be unsweetened cocoa, green tea, apples, blueberries, pomegranate seeds, and then omega-3 fats. Great source here is walnuts or flax or chia added to the diet for some of those essential fats. Our gut microbes actually like these things. They make it down into the gut and they get digested by your probiotics. Bam, more postbiotics, right? That's what we want. So I love this acronym. This is from Dr. Will Bulsiewicz. If you haven't heard of him yet, he wrote Fiber Fueled, and then his second book, the Fiber Fueled Cookbook, is amazing. We recommend it to people in our gut health program, but this is a great way to kind of put in your brain these foods that we want to get in on a consistent basis. So any fruits in that F, also fermented foods. Greens and grains would be our G. Omega-3, so we can get this, like I just mentioned, through seeds, some of our nuts. Very important. We call them essential fats because we have to consume them through our diet. Aromatics, this would be like garlic and onion family. Really potent, what we call phytonutrients that are found in that class of foods that are very anti-inflammatory and do the same thing in the gut. Beans and legumes, that's our L, so we'll just say legumes. I'm so used to saying beans and legumes, but legumes. So all of our class of black beans, chickpeas, lentils, split peas, any of those in that group, switch it up. They all give you a little bit something different in the gut. And then S, sulforaphane, one of our most potent phytonutrients that is a really powerful cancer crusher. So it is found in rich concentration in vegetables like cruciferous cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. One of the most potent ways you can get this in would be through broccoli sprouts, which you can actually do on your own. That's a whole other presentation, but broccoli sprouts you can actually get in the store as well. They're super easy to grow at home, but that is your most powerful cancer fighter actually in the food world would be sulforaphane. And to take advantage of that in raw form, broccoli sprouts are one of the best, but otherwise including in this diverse selection of cruciferous vegetables as well. Okay, I'm going fast because I'm looking at the clock and my time, I feel like my time's running out. So top tips on building a healthy microbiome. So we want to eat a wide variety of plants. That's what we've just been talking about here, right? Diversity is key when it comes to building the optimal gut to work for you. Other lifestyle habits as well are just as important. So getting enough sleep. We've learned a lot more about this over the last couple of years. We're seeing more evidence come out around the role that sleep plays in our microbiome. So our gut bugs are actually on that same body clock, that circadian rhythm. And they're working on that same schedule. So in fact, if we're eating, late into the evening, we're never really allowing our gut the chance to go pivot into cleanup and repair mode for overnight. It's still trying to do digestion and it doesn't want to. So digestion is sloppy if we're eating late and it's interfering with our sleep as well. That's another way, but getting really, really good sleep, restful, enough time, around 7 to 8 hours for most. But we find that sleep deprivation, jet lag, shift work, all linked to reduced microbial diversity. So we talked about that in the very beginning today. We don't want reduced diversity, right? We want more diversity. So getting good sleep plays a big role in that. Exercise, like I talked about before, even just walking, that's going to give you a really good boost in those probiotics, but also their ability to produce more of the postbiotics. And then, of course, like I said, bonus points if you're getting that outdoors, because we know that now a lot of us are living a more sanitized indoor lifestyle, and that is not a good thing for our microbial health. So we've seen that people who live in the countryside or more rural area tend to have more diverse microbiomes than city dwellers do. So if you can't make it in the great outdoors, if it's not right out your door, spending time in a park, in a garden, anywhere you can get around nature is very beneficial for your gut microbiome. So that's why I say bonus points if you're doing that exercise outdoors, taking a walk. And then avoiding unnecessary antibiotics. We talked about this with food, how there's this use in animal farming with antibiotics. That's one really big way it comes in to us. And then can kill off those good bacteria living in our gut, and then also has played a very prominent role in the development of superbugs that are antibiotic resistant. So once again, very important to watch, where's my food coming from? How is it raised? Who's doing it? How do they treat their animals? All of that matters in the end product. So we need to get a little bit more connected with that or reacquainted. So if you're wondering, this is my final slide, the big finale. How long does it take for me to improve my gut? Roughly 28 days, so about a month, is what we see. And I want to put an asterisk on that because it depends also on the degree of dysbiosis you're starting with. So if you, let's say, have a digestive disease like inflammatory bowel disease, it may take a lot longer than that. But know that we do see a shift as early as that 28-day mark in the gut microbiome, and that's a good thing. But we need to keep consistent. We need to keep building off of that. And over time, you're going to see the payoffs. So the microbiome's got to adapt to the fiber we're bringing in. It's new for a lot of us. So your gut is going to go, whoa, this is new. Hold on. Let me get up to speed here. We also can see an increase in our own digestive enzymes. And then we can see an increase in the generation of those postbiotics in that time frame. So then we still keep going, right? We want to now get to a place where we're producing those on a consistent daily basis. And that's where the real magic happens as we get a little further out and we continue on that journey. After antibiotics, if you've had to take antibiotics, it can take a minimum of 4 weeks for the microbiome to return to the state it was prior to the antibiotics. So if you were in a state of dysbiosis prior to antibiotics, it can take even longer. So just know that. Give yourself some grace. Be patient. That's one thing I think we always have to work on, right? Is being patient with ourselves and allowing time for things to heal, time for things to shift, getting used to this new way of eating and a new way of designing your meals or filling your plate, but it will happen. Keep at it, right? You may slide. Know this, that you have the power to get back on with the very next choice you have. You don't have to wait till next Monday or the start of the next month or maybe January 1st of the next year, right? You never have to wait. That's something we put on ourselves. You can do it at any point in time. You can get back on track. So you started this journey with the Plant Power Challenge. I wish you tons of luck on continuing that. You got an awesome start with it. And I want to stop sharing so that I can come back to my normal screen, and then we'll take a few questions here before we end.
Thank you so much, Krista. That was amazing for the original.
Thanks.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat that I want to get to since we have about 10 minutes. So the first question is, how do I determine a good probiotic supplement? 10 billion to 50 billion. They put that in the chat, but if you have other suggestions.
Yeah. So what I would definitely suggest is to focus on the prebiotic. You could definitely take a probiotic if you'd like. I would say the strains you want to look for would be lactobacillus strains, and bifidobacterium strains. Definitely. Especially too, if you've eliminated dairy, those will be missing. And those are important groups of microbial strains that have should have a strong presence in the gut, especially when we're healing. So the important thing is, yes, you can add a probiotic, but if you don't change the input, right, the diet that contains the prebiotics, or if you're still working on that, then I would say adding a fiber supplement to kind of bridge you so that you're feeding the probiotics you're putting in. Because a lot of us will take a supplement and then not change anything else. And you're not feeding those probiotics. That's the most important part is the prebiotic. But if you've been on antibiotics, probiotics can be helpful.
Okay, thank you. The next one is from Eileen. I have added microgreens to my diet. They're grown bi-weekly and I pick them up from a local grower. What can you tell me about these?
Yeah, they're super nutrient dense. The young forms, right, of our greens and our mature greens and vegetables. So they're very nutrient dense, often very easy to absorb by us. So if you struggle with getting in some of these plant foods and you got to work at it, you got to go slow, that can be a great way to bring some of that nutrient density in an easy to digest way, in a more absorbable way. I will say sprouts have one leg up on them. So I would say sprouts then microgreens. Microgreens are phenomenal. But I would say try adding some sprouts too, but that's a great thing to add for more bioavailability, we call it.
All right, thank you. I love this next question from Heidi. Plant-based since September 2024, still having lots of gas from beans. Is long-term Beano use okay? But also maybe just to expand on that, any suggestions that you might have for her or anything like that to help with
Beans.
some of
Yeah.
that?
Yes. So consistency is always number one. Stay consistent with keeping them in the diet. One thing you can do is try making your own from dried. A lot of people have a lot of success with that when they're having difficulty tolerating them and getting just like a lot of gas. When you do them yourself, soaking is the part that actually helps them be more digestible. Um, and you can do that with Instant Pot as well if you have an Instant Pot and make it quicker. But yes, making them yourself, rinsing canned beans very well. Some people will also soak those. I don't have great evidence on that, but I have anecdotal evidence on that. And then if you cook your own beans, adding actually oregano to the mix has been shown to help with the gassiness, but Beano is completely fine to take long term, as much as you want. I will say beans, they always give you gas. It's just if it's become a real problem or it's very uncomfortable, then you maybe want to try some of those methods. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Hmm.
Have you seen any research or studies that show a reversal of celiac disease from improved gut microbiome?
No. I have not seen that at all. It would be great to see that actually. No, I have not seen any reversal. Um, but what we do know is that for future, because once you have an autoimmune condition, what we do see that it sometimes seems like it's easier for other autoimmune things to kind of come up as a result, right? And celiac does have some of those concerns. So when we promote gut health and we improve gut health, then we can often halt some of that process that may have started the celiac in the first place. Because once again, autoimmune, right? We may have had this breakdown happen at some point that flipped that switch on that you carried for that.
Okay, informative. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, oh, it's a good one. Are greens better cooked or uncooked?
Both. I'd say do a combination because, some greens, when you cook them, they actually become more nutrient dense. Kale is a good example of that. But a mix of both. And I would say that for all vegetables because there are some nutrients that become more bioavailable, meaning your body can absorb them better if you cook it. And then some are more bioavailable when you eat them raw. So, right, the theme here is variety and diversity, and that includes cooking methods as well, the way that we eat those foods.
Okay. And then is milk and cheese bad? And does taking probiotic pills, is that helpful if you're eating milk and cheese?
I would say the biggest helper if you're having trouble with dairy products would be to take a lactase enzyme like lactate, because that's really the problem is that you probably have had a big decrease in that enzyme, which the majority of us do. 70% of the global population is lactose intolerant. That tells us something, right? That we really don't need it. Really, the concern for me is, especially with cheese, that's a big source of saturated fat in our diet here in the United States, which is very pro-inflammatory and very gut disruptive. So that's one reason. The other reason with dairy products, and this is something that we talk about a lot in lifestyle medicine, is just that increase in excess natural estrogen coming from the female cow, more on top of our own. We now have a strong link with prostate cancer. We also have a link with breast cancer as well. So these hormone-related cancers, um, it's a problem. So we want to really be careful how much we have of that in the diet if we have it.
Thank you for that. Super
Mhm.
informative. All right, I think we'll have time for about one more question. I do like this question. So is there a test available to analyze gut health?
There are tests available. What I will say is we're not there yet on how well we can interpret that. We're getting there, and we will see that, I think. I think in 10 years we're going to see a big difference with that stuff. But yes, there are a couple out there. The key is reputable places because there is a lot of them popping up. The one that I tend to gravitate towards would be a company called Zoe, just Zoe. Um, if you Google like Zoe, because I'm forgetting the actual address, but if you Google Zoe Wellness, it'll pop up. They're actually one of the ones that have done some of the large studies after COVID and the impact on our health and gut health. So we've gotten some really great findings from them. They're doing it right. They're learning as they go and they're kind of performing it as a study, but they have a pretty good program that they've built around interpreting some of these results. Dr. Will Bolsowitz is on the medical board with Zoe. He's the medical director, I think, in the United States for them now. So very trusted and very rooted in evidence. That's what you want. So that's a good one. I think Viome's another one that is a pretty decent one as well. Use caution on how much money you spend on them. You want to get what you hope to out of it. We're just not exactly where we want to be yet.
For sure. Well, thank you so much. I guess to close out, if there's any like resources or any other, gut health, anything coming up within the practice or anything like that that you want to share to close us
Yeah.
out. But otherwise, thank you
Yeah,
so much for
thanks.
the
Yes.
time.
We have an awesome gut health program with our lifestyle medicine team. Our next group is going to be starting March 3rd, so still some time to get in there. It is a 10-week program. We do it all virtually. You do need to be in the state of Michigan, though, to participate in that since it is a medical visit with a dietitian. But oftentimes it is covered by your insurance because it is billed like a dietitian appointment. But it's really a nice comprehensive program stretched out over 10 weeks where it's the dietitian and one of our chefs that are co-teaching it. So you get the best of both worlds. You get to really dive in and learn more, and then you learn how to apply it through the food, and we show you how to do that, and you can cook along with us. It's a really fun program. So yeah, I think they can contact us. For a little bit more information on that, if you want to sign up for that, our schedulers are fantastic and they can give you more information on that as well. Um, I think, does everybody know how to contact us? Probably at this point.
Yeah, you can just
Late.
Google Corewell Health Lifestyle Medicine. Our phone number's on there. You can also find it on our Facebook page. And I think on a lot of the plant-based challenge materials, you can
Yeah.
find information on how to contact us.
Yep.
So,
Okay. Great. Great. Well, thanks for having me.
yes, thank you
Wonderful
so much,
questions
Krista.
too. Yeah, I love that. Someday we'll just have to do a Q&A question with the dietitian, right? Thanks everybody. Keep going on the plant power challenge. Don't let it stop after January. Keep moving.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.